Hey, this is Jay Izienicki, and this is episode 1 of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast.
Mission 3, 2, 1.
This is the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. We believe there's no defensive situation so bad that your lack of training can make it worse.
We're on a mission to cut the crap in the firearms industry and bring you only the most powerful, impactful, and useful discussions and tips on mindset, gear, and personal defense that is designed to make you a more informed and effective gunfighter.
Guys, gals, and submarine racers, here are your hosts, Jay Izienicki and Mike Garza. All right, well, thank you for joining us. This is episode 1 of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action podcast. My name is Jay Izienicki, and with me is my co-host, Mike Garza. And we appreciate you for joining us for our first show. So, Mike, I'm kind of all set up here. I have High West Campfire Whiskey and Coke. I have my registration for SHOT Show. And so I'm ready to go. I don't know about you on that side.
Yeah, if for whatever reason, SHOT Show always waits the last possible minute to send anything to their neighbor, Arizona. I don't understand what it is, but that's how it was last year. I was biting my nails thinking, dang it, I'm going to have to stand in that really long line of 500 people to get their passes.
Well, we're in Nevada. We don't like people from Arizona. That's what the problem is. You didn't get the memo, apparently. Apparently not.
Apparently.
Yeah. So, hey, kind of what I thought we'd do for this episode is, since we have some people that know who we are already, but could be some people that are joining us for the first time and they don't know who we are, I thought kind of what we do is maybe just introduce ourselves, tell a little bit about each other, and then maybe talk about the mission of Latent Force, some of our philosophies as far as training goes. And then maybe if we have some time, we'll get one of our pro tips in there, which is just a section where we can give everybody that's listening something to take out to the range or to consider in their training, just to make them a little bit better tomorrow than they are today. So that's kind of the thought for today's show. If that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good green light.
Yeah.
Give it a whirl.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to do too is kind of some of the plans for the future, and kind of how these podcasts are going to be set up going forward. So everybody's kind of familiar and has an idea. Is kind of when we put this together, we said, hey, let's kind of do this in some sort of a logical order and just the way somebody might actually train. So we're thinking is how this will go is if you start out from safety and then just work its way through fundamentals and just move on to more advanced topics as we go, as we develop these programs and have more. That way, somebody can jump from the very beginning and follow us along and catch up, or maybe if they feel that they can jump ahead, they can, catch a later episode or something like that. And then hopefully, we certainly, and we have this at the end, is make sure to send us an email if you have any questions or suggestions for shows, podcast at latentforce.com. Send us an email there, or you can even send us a message on Facebook. We got a Facebook page there too. And because we'd like to answer people's questions. So that's helpful. And then maybe in the future, we'll add some current event topic discussions. So,
no, it sounds pretty feasible. We should add it in there. If you have nudes, go ahead and send them.
Oh, okay. So we're already getting into the current events and topic discussions. Okay. Yeah. Send those to a different address at Latent Force. All right. Well, so I'll give you, first, I guess I'll start with me only because I have my finger on the button. So I'll start with me is, my background. I grew up around guns. Both my in-laws and my parents have always been involved with shooting sports and hunting and those type of things. So my earliest memory was taking a hunter safety class when I was a little kid, and it stuck with me. My parents just dropped me off. I was all by myself, and I just took this class. I don't remember how old I was. Maybe I was like 12 or something like that. And I got to shoot the gun all by myself. And I absolutely remember exactly where it was, the smell of the range, all of that type of stuff. That was my earliest memory. But the thing is that everybody needs to realize is how important it is to realize the impressions that we make on our kids at those early stages of those things. And that's how, why it's important to get them involved as early as possible. So for me, it went there from small game hunting up to big game, deer and elk, those type of things. I grew up in Colorado, so that was a natural. And then in 1998 was kind of a turning point for me where I realized for me in an experience that I had is that I kind of had a hole in my personal protection plan. I've played football, wrestled, judo, that type of stuff. I always knew I could take care of myself, but you get in a situation where none of that stuff matters. And somebody that has a higher level of offense than you makes you realize pretty quick that you need to have a better plan. So that's when I began my defensive training. Was back then in 1998. Got my first CCW, and I just kind of really kind of got the bug and really enjoyed it. Kept sticking with it. So I began doing instruction, shadowing instructors, co-instructing, and I got to do some lead under the direct mentorship of some really cool guys that were very helpful. Then in 2004, I joined in law enforcement in the Southwest. I did a lot of patrol, DUI task force, extraditions, was on a warrant team for several years, worked human smuggling, all those type of things. And I was fortunate I had a really cool, very active sergeant who actually required us to train together as a squad every Sunday before we had breakfast. And that squad training was a huge thing that, I learned a lot about building clearing and all those type of things, taking all this stuff after the academy to learn how to do all this stuff. But in 2009, I had kind of another one of those turning points. I was, not to share war stories, but it helps. Had a LoJack ping on a stolen GMC Yukon Denali, and we went out to that area to go and find it. And we got out into the desert out there. Resulted in there was a bunch of buildings, multiple buildings out there that we were going to have to clear and make sure that nobody was going to get shot at or anything like that. And I look around, and I'm the only guy with a pistol. And I'm going, gee, it'd be nice to have a long gun of some sort in this particular situation. And so it was one of those things that made me realize that there was a bunch of tools that I didn't have in my tool bag. And so that's what got me into my path to instructing in 2010. That's when I became a general instructor with the office, and then moved on as a firearms instructor. And through the years since then, I've accumulated a bunch of certificates, training, had some great mentors along the way, been fortunate to have some really cool people that I worked with along the way, some good training. And then in 2011, sitting in my kitchen, I started Latent Force. And 2015, even though it's 2017, I decided that I'd start a podcast. And here we are 2 years later and finally actually doing it. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. How about you, Mike? Tell everybody about you.
Well, that's pretty in depth. You're going to get the abbreviated for me because my wife always asks me, "Hey, do you know what date that was?" I'm like, "No, I can't remember past yesterday, so I'm not as good as my dates with Jay is." So, I grew up in a non-gun friendly home, and I don't know if that was because of my parents or just where we were all the time. My dad was a hotel manager. He took hotels that were in the red or losing a lot of money, and then he flipped them. And he started making money for the owners. So we would normally live inside hotels all the time. So you can't really, have a BB gun in the room and go down to the pool area and shoot lizards too much.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a little different social structure for me, I guess. I did one day bother my dad so bad and told him I would never speak to him again if he didn't take me out to the range. So he did take me one time out to the range. Now you have to understand, my dad is a golf, tennis, pool, like as in billiards type person, and we went out there to the gun range, and he rented a 22, and I was like, this is the coolest thing since sliced bread. And this guy next to us, which I know now was probably a 38 snubby, my dad looked at him and goes, "Look how small that pistol is. We have a long rifle." And man, when he cracked that round off, my dad probably jumped 3 feet out of his shoes. So I knew that was not my dad. He was not a hunter. He was not a personal protection type person. So immediately after that, I got sent to camp. And that's really where I had my very, very first real experience with guns. We shot from the prone, we shot from the sitting, all kinds of stuff. So that's really where my fascination started. During high school, just regular kid, shooting lizards like you with BB guns with my buddies at their house with I don't know how we got a hold of that BB gun, but I guess laws back then at Wally World were a little bit less lax. Nowadays they'd probably tackle you on your way out the door to see your ID for a BB gun.
Yeah, I got my first rifle. I don't even remember. I don't even think I was 18. I had to have been 18. I don't know, but yeah, I was at Gibson's. If anybody
don't
knows
be breaking any laws.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know. But you just walked in. I was a kid and I bought one. I don't know. Couldn't do that now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So anyhow, that was kind of my upbringing, right? And then really where all of this nonsense really started was when I went out on my own. I joined the Navy. I was F-14 mechanic. We did weapon systems, radar systems. So that's really all that we did as far as that. So in boot camp, they give you the spiel. You get a rifle, you shoot at the little target, and then they're like, okay, good to go. And if, God forbid you turn that gun on one of the instructors, back in those days, the military actually, you did a little bit of sweating after that. So that was really all I did for the Navy. Now, what really got me hooked up after the fact was when I got close to my end of service obligation, we were working on lantern pods. They're bomb dropping pods. They mark targets for things from high altitude. So a buddy of mine got me a really nice contracting gig. We went overseas several times, all kinds of high tech stuff, and we had to take care of ourselves. Like how you had an event, where you saw your hole in your personal defense program. Mine was a real life experience. Oh, not to mention that while I was in the Navy, we drank a little bit. So we would go to bars and stuff, and I got held up gunpoint 2 times, not once, but twice. The first time was in Millington, Tennessee, and the second time was in Hampton, Virginia. When we had this incident where we came back from being overseas, my problem wasn't the actual gun play. It was the fact that when you go into these types of situations, especially with LE and Jay, you would know, where you really depend on the guy next to you. And this guy, was supposed to have my back. He was supposed to be my blood, my brother, the whole 9 yards. The whole time we've never really gotten into the thick of things, but when we got home, we did get into the thick of things. And when that first round cracked off, I never saw him until after the incident was over, and he literally was just you could see the stars in his eyes. He was keys in Jeep, and he wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. And I'm like, that's really truly where it blew my mind. It's you thought it was supposed to be having your back the entire time, and it wasn't there. So that really got me on the defensive, and it got me thinking, okay, I need to change what I'm doing, and I need to be better, and I need to only rely on myself. Is what I got out of that. So anyways, to make a long story short, that's where I kind of started taking personal training to elevate, myself, my skill set. At that point, I got out of contract business, and I actually got a job with the federal government, with the FAA, and I came to Arizona. Here in Arizona, there's a posse program, and that's what the sheriff's office of Maricopa County, it used to be Sheriff Joe, now it's Sheriff Penzone. That program really appealed to me because it was free training. So I was like, oh, that is awesome. I'm going to save a lot of money, and I'm going to get to train. So I started down that road, same as you. They saw that, hey, Mike is cool under pressure. Let's throw him in with the warrants team. We did warrants for, 3, 4, 5 years. I liked it. I wanted more. So then that's when I met you in the firearms training school to become an instructor. And again, just like my buddy said, a good buddy said, keep your mouth shut, sit in the back of the room, absorb everything that the instructors, that the students have to offer before you start throwing your 2 cents in. So that's the general gist of it.
No, it's a good story. I mean, and that's important for people to know that everybody comes from a different type of background, and not everybody has to have a life or death situation in order to realize that they need to change stuff. And yeah, like you said, I was in Atlanta when mine happened to me, and you just don't realize until it happens that you got, and that's for me is why I do it, is because I want to help people so they don't have a hole in their defense plan and realize it, and then they can't do anything about it, and then the worst possible thing happens. So yeah, it's good that we kind of have the same kind of stories of how you get there, different paths. Kind of, I guess, I was thinking, Mike, and I was looking at it, I was like, I could read, and I don't know how boring that is to hear me read a mission statement. So I thought maybe instead kind of just hit the highlights and kind of go over some of those things, maybe drill down just a little bit, because I think understanding why we do what we do, why we're here trying to train people and bring this to not only people in law enforcement, but also armed citizens is so important, because I feel that there's really is a gap there. So our experience, I shouldn't say mine, but our experience really did expose that we trained to help people pass a test, and we didn't do it to provide actual life-saving skills. I mean, did I sum that up pretty good?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's funny that you say that, because even now when we do CCW classes, it's still a test. It's still, you got to shoot, 5 rounds here and 5 rounds there, which still does not depict real life.
Exactly. Our mission was that we wanted to fill a critical and essential role for both law enforcement and citizen shooters. And when I say that, like, a critical role is that we wanted to make sure that it was affordable, it was high quality. And one of the important things, and you touched on it, is, the difference between shooting at paper and shooting at an actual human being is completely different. And we wanted to make sure that it was reality based. We wanted to make sure to bring reality into it. Yeah, we're not going to be going and shooting people, but we have to make it as close as we possibly can, because we want people to realize and find those holes and those weaknesses out in a training environment instead of in real life. And we wanted to design and develop critical thinking, which is the biggest part of that. Is I think a lot of people think this is just a skill, a physical skill. I pick up a gun, I shoot a gun, I aim a gun, and I hit the target. And we really wanted to design these courses, and our training was to develop critical thinking and gunfighting skills, actual skills, instead of those type of things. So those are really important parts of it, I think. And I don't know, I guess I'm going to take it back. I guess I'm going to have to read it, because I didn't take good enough notes. That's my fault. But anyways, let me just read it to you, because I think it'll hit on everything. And I'll try and use my best voice that I can so nobody falls asleep. But our mission is to help each individual student with conviction answer the same primal question: when danger finds me, will I be prepared to face it and defeat it, or will I be helpless, unable to protect myself or my family? And I think that's one of our mission is to make sure that everybody that leaves training can say without a doubt is that, yes, when it finds me, I'm ready. So we trust that everyone desires to play the central role in their own survival. And that's the whole thing, is we realize that if you're taking a class from us, you want to be the person that's playing that central role in your survival instead of allowing others to determine your fate. At our core, we strive to build each person's confidence level to such a point that if the moment comes, they'll be prepared, strong, and courageous, and will act with violence of action and without hesitation against a criminal attack in protection of themselves and their family. So that's the thing. The big key here is that you can't be freaking out at the Jeep trying to put the keys in the ignition and get out of there. You have to be ready, right?
Yeah. Again, I think you hit the nail right on the head. The family portion is really what kind of made me grow up, right? Not too much. I'm not that grown up, so don't get your hopes up. But when I was in the Navy and single, I didn't have a care in the world. That's why we went to bars and we drank. And luckily I made out of both those incidents with my life. But as soon as I got married and I have kids, now my whole platform has changed, where okay, now I need to make sure that when I'm in the movie theater, I know where my kids are. My kids know what I'm going to do if something happens. And it's all now for me, all about my family. Me personally, I could care less about myself other than I got to make sure my family's set up if something were to happen to me. That's like the only thing that runs through my mind.
Sure.
Everything else is to protect my family.
And one of the things is that our mission is that we take what we do very serious. And we understand that the societal concerns that are out there, and people wanting self-defense tools, are very real for everybody, regardless of their age, their gender, and their physical strength or limitations. So it doesn't matter who you are. You wanting to have the tools to defend yourself is hugely important. And we want to be, we take it serious that we train people and teach people how to use those skills. But the biggest thing is that for us, for learning to take place, it's got to happen in a professional, fun, engaging, and safe training environment for both us and the students. This is on every form that we send out that you've got to sign, is that we will not compromise the safety of our students and staff for the sake of profit. If you're violating safety rules and you're being extremely dangerous, you're going to be asked to leave. And we've had students that have signed up for classes that refused to sign our form that said, you agree to the rules that we set out on the range. And those students did not attend our class, because we're not going to have somebody in there if they have a problem with signing that and claim that we're just doing that so we can kick you out. That's not our plan. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. And if you're already sketchy enough that you won't sign it up in the beginning and agree to those rules, we don't need you in the class anyways.
Yeah, if you're trying to get your jollies through training, then you've got other issues that you need to deal with. There's plenty of other firearms instructors that have camera guys standing between targets and stuff like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Our biggest thing is there's no magic potion, technique, gun, or piece of equipment that works for every person or situation. So we advocate very strongly for multiple approaches to the same problem. And we do that by providing very low, that's our big thing, is we want to have those low student to instructor ratios. And we've talked about this before, is we want to make sure that that it isn't 10 students to one instructor trying to cover, 50 feet. We want to make sure that the ratios are low, because each one of us has a different style, different approach, and different thought process. And if something doesn't work that I show a student, but 5 minutes later you come down the line and you say, hey, try this, and it works, that's what we want, because there isn't one way to do it to get it accomplished. It's whatever works for that individual. So we want to make sure that everybody understands, you come to class, we're going to find what works for you, not tell you to do what works for us. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's almost like taking, there are some places on the range where you can do the one-on-one instructor, which is a lot of money. I think it's like $100 per hour or something crazy like that. The problem is, again, you're only being exposed to one instructor versus the instructors that we have here. I mean, we have instructors that come from all facets of life. Some regular Joe guys, some volunteers, some have a little bit of LE background. So it's nice to get that nice little blend going.
The violence that's necessary in self-defense with a firearm is not for everybody. And we completely respect that there are those people that choose less violent paths to self-defense. And I can respect that. And I think all of our instructors can do the same. Our desire is that every student, as a result of taking our class, is going to be aware and prepared in advance, not only physically but mentally and also spiritually, because that matters, is to act without hesitation, whatever it may be, whether it's OC spray, a taser, or it is a firearm. You got to do it without hesitation and have already made those decisions well in advance, because in the moment is no time to decide whether, oh no, will I be able to do it, and what are the moral implications of me pulling the trigger? You can't decide that then. You have to have done it in advance. And if we've had students come through the academy and we said, brother, this ain't for you. You don't need to be carrying a gun.
Yeah, it's funny. And again, I try and tell students it's one of those things that I made people cry, in Milo. Milo is a computer simulation that we use to actually test their skill set to make sure that they understand use of force and everything, as it's applied here in Arizona with the AZ Post standards. But it wasn't. I wasn't meaning to make them cry. I wasn't being a mean guy. I was just taking them down that path to show them, hey, look, if this is how you're going to react in a safe scenario, with you getting all emotional and breaking down, not being able to press the trigger, then what are you going to do when you're in the real world and your partner is being beaten to death by a little kid, with a baseball bat with nails, and you can't shoot that little kid? I mean, it sucks, but that's what it is.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that you got to know. And I've always found it funny is that the people that are offended, I know that, there's a reason that you have a morale patch that has a bomb with an F on it. And that's the reason that we love you so much. But some people get offended by the language. But the reality is that the bad guy isn't going to say please and thank you. And if hearing somebody yell, because I guarantee you they're going to be saying some bad things to you about how you need to get on the ground or whatever you need to do, they're going to be yelling at it. And if you can't handle it, like you said, in a safe training environment, man, you're going to have some challenges when the real world hits you square in the face. So when we're talking about real world, it's our obligation is that we want to increase everybody's awareness to the constantly changing climate of violence and indifference to life being displayed by today's criminal threats. And we do that by regularly modifying our self-defense training methodologies. And we do that to make sure that we're taking care of the new ways. That's the advantage of having people that are in law enforcement, is they have ideas and understandings of what the trends are and how things are changing. And that allows us to help change our training to address those type of threats that everybody's facing. So kind of a rundown on kind of what our mission is and what we're trying to do.
I like it.
Yeah. Hey, well, thanks. I just wrote it. Just kidding. I joke. But no, I mean, and one of the things I think that is probably most important, everybody says, oh, okay, great, Jay. Now we know all about your mission and all that stuff. That's great. But what am I going to expect when we do the training? So I guess it gets more to the philosophy part of it. So I wanted to kind of make sure everybody understood what that core philosophy of what we're about when we're doing the training and what you can expect when you're out on the range. And the number one thing for us is, and it's in our name, and it's the name of this podcast, is prepared defensive action. And it's very simple. Okay. And if you see any of our Stay in the Fight videos, it's narrated in there. It's your focus strength that lies dormant until circumstances require you yourself to make an immediate and critical change. And that's what prepared defensive action is that we want to make sure that you have the skills, the knowledge, the abilities, and the confidence and the strength to do it. Now, you don't have to walk around crazy, psychotic, and thinking everybody's going to kill you. However, you need to have it just below the surface. And that's what you need. And so when the moment comes, it's able to just like that, turn it on and be able to use that force to change the tide to your advantage. Also, we want to make sure that you take one of our classes, and it's funny because I was looking through some of our student reviews that we put up on the website. And one of them is the guy, his name was Tack, and he took the class and he was like, holy crap, I was so tired. I was like exhausted. I've never worked so hard in a class. And maybe that was the point. Yes, that was the point. We made you work and got you tired so you could find your failure points. And so having physical skills is only one part of the total equation. So we are going to work you hard, but the point is that you got to start thinking about your mind. So training of the mind is a critical and larger other part of this whole equation. So it's not just having the skills and the physical ability to do it, but you also have to have the right mindset. So we want to make sure that you become a critical thinking gunfighter. Keep that in mind. Critical thinking gunfighter. One of the big things is why. And we want to make sure that every one of our students ask why. Just because, Mike, if you tell them to do something and you say, hey, I want you to put one hand on top of your head and I want you to jump around in circles on your right foot, and then I only want you to shoot every third second, I'm sure we can get some students to do that. But the question I want them is I want them to say why. Why does that matter? Why does that have anything to do with what I'm doing? And why does it have to do with improving my skills? So it's very simple as to why am I asking you to, right? I mean, we tweak things in a very small way for people. And we just say, hey, try it this way now. Do this small move here, do that, right? I mean, you do it all the time on the line, and they should be asking, how come you're asking me to do that, right?
Absolutely. You want to start with the very basic functions, and you want people to run through the basic stuff. and then you want them to get the general idea and then continue to slim it down, trim off the fat, get faster, get better. Perfect practice. I believe we say that almost every other second of the day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just simply doing something without understanding why it improves your skill. I mean, that's the thing that's most frustrating. Just doing something without knowing why it makes you better and effective is a complete waste of time. You go to a class and somebody says, hey, do this, do this, do this, and you have no idea why you're doing that. Well, it's not going to stick with you. You have no idea why it's making you better. So when it starts to fall apart on you, you just abandon it and go back to what you used to know because you have no idea why it was any better for you. So that's what we want to make sure. Don't waste your time. Make sure you understand. You've got to know, in order to know how to improve, you have to understand. So we want people to be able to, once they leave classes, that they are able to correct their own problems. We're not going to always be there, so you got to be able to figure out how to do that. And if you don't understand why we're having you hold the gun a certain way or why we're having you stand a certain way or why we're having you do something, you're never going to be able to correct it when we're not there, right?
Absolutely. Just a quick example so you guys kind of get what we're talking about is a weaver stance versus a tactical stance. What would you like to have? 2 lungs shot out or just 1 lung shot out? It's really that simple.
Wow. Well, I guess it is that simple. I never really thought about it. It's pretty gruesome. Okay. All right. All right. Well, okay. I get you. I get your point though. But I mean, you have to understand. So what the heck does that mean? If you don't understand how you're standing and you don't understand what you mean by that, then you're just going to
tune into the next podcast.
There you go. There you go. Leave them with a little teaser. That's right. So again, our biggest thing is that we're talking about art, mindset, and philosophy of self-defense. And I know that gets kind of nebulous and kind of weird, but there is truly an art to gunfighting. There is a special mindset that you have to have. Who you were before you decided to carry a gun is a lot different than who you are after you decide to carry a gun. And so you have to be aware that it's going to change your life, and it should anyways, and it should change the life of your family and how you do things and how you start thinking. And then that philosophy of how you're going to take care of yourselves and your family going forward. So keep in mind it's only 10% physical, 90% mental. So it doesn't take much to press the trigger, but it takes a lot of mental power in order to get all those other things working together and under pressure, those type of things. So we want to help develop people into super well-rounded shooters. And the reason that we want to do that is because we want to make sure that everybody understands the legal aspects of defensive shooting as well as the mental preparation that's necessary, because you're going to have to prepare yourself for the fight. And we say this all the time is that, when you think about these things, is your mind prepared for where your body is going to have to go? And you got to really think about that, because your body is going to be in these environments when the excrement hits the fan. Your body's going to be there. So is your mind prepared to go where you're going to have to take your body? And so that's the thing. Now, awareness is a way to keep your ass out of trouble. You have to be aware of your surroundings, what's happening, so you don't get in those situations. Because if we can avoid it, that's all the better. And then obviously performance of those foundational skills. So those things, you got to be able to do all those 4 things. And then finally, my biggest mantra that I've always been saying forever, and I don't even know where it came from. Not sure who told it to me. I don't know. I'd give it attribution if I could, but I don't know. It stuck with me, which is avoid, remove, and defend. And so it's pretty simple. If you can remember those three words, I don't care about the order, as long as you remember avoid. Avoid areas, people, and circumstances that pose a threat. Seems pretty simple, right? Just don't even go there. If you're in some back alley in Atlanta at 1:00 in the morning, maybe you shouldn't be there, Jay. So avoid areas, people, and circumstances.
Now, it's funny that you say that. It's funny that you say that, because I know that there's going to be some people that say, well, come on, Jay. I mean, you can go where you want to. This is America.
Sure,
right?
Sure, you can. You can, and deal with the consequences, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. The next one is obviously, if you find yourself there and you found yourself in that crappy situation that you couldn't avoid, you got to remove yourself immediately. as soon as possible. Remove yourself from that situation. And then finally is if you couldn't avoid it and you're stuck in it and there's no way out, then obviously you have got to be prepared to defend yourself. And that means violence of action without hesitation. If you choose not to use defensive a firearm, then whatever those evasive actions that you have in place, if it's running and hiding, if it's throwing a fire extinguisher, whatever it might be, or if it's that physical engagement. So you just have to use violence of action against that criminal threat until they no longer pose a threat to you. So those are going to be our main philosophies. I mean, I don't know if I missed anything, Mike. I mean,
no, it looks like you pretty much covered them all. And again, we preach it, right? We say it, but you actually have to do it too. And not only do you have to do it, but you have to do that all under stress.
So I think, we've kind of covered a lot of ground as far as kind of telling about us. Sometimes it's not easy talking about us, and sometimes I imagine it's not easy listening to us talk about us. But I wanted to make sure is that the most important thing is you can go to a website, www.latentforce.com, and read about us, but sometimes listen to us tell about what it is that we're thinking is really hard to get from what's the written word. And so I thought it'd be valuable for us to kind of talk about where we come from, the things that we do. And again, we could sit here for hours and talk about it, but we just kind of tried to gloss over hit the high points. And I think as we go through these podcasts, you probably get even better feel for where we are and drilling down into some topics that are going to be important to everybody.
Agreed. Yeah, don't be shy. That's the other thing is there is no dumb question. Hey, have you heard our stories? Trust us, we'll cover the dumb for you. So you just give us the questions and we'll try and figure them out for you, or we can all figure it out together, right?
Yep, that's what we're hoping for.
The good thing is that you can always fast forward if you're like, these guys are idiots, and just be done with it.
Hey, don't give them any ideas. We're not idiots. I don't know what you're talking about. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody joining us today. It was good conversation. Hope you liked everything. If you have any questions, comments, obviously make sure to hit us up, like we said, and we'll catch you guys the next time. And that'll be a wrap for this episode of the Latent Force Prepared Defensive Action Podcast. Be sure to give us a like and a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or visit our website, www.latentforce.com, so you can get all the latest information from Latent Force. If you have any suggestions or comments on this show, or suggestions for a future show, shoot us an email to podcast@latentforce.com. On behalf of Mike Garza and myself, thank you for joining us. Be safe, and as always, stay in the fight.
Peace out.